sorry. The good news at the end. I don't know if you saw this in the news yesterday. The Pope has fired the nuncio who brought Kim Davis to his private meeting where they were here. It was great. I couldn't put the picture on there, but this was the thing. It was in the Daily Cause, and this was the thing. They call him Frankie, Pope Francis. Seriously, Frankie says, relax. There's a picture of him going. Any questions? Or?
What's the time frame?
Well, the question was, what's the time frame for this case? I expect that what's going to happen is after we get through the motions to dismiss, I think the court's going to say we have standing, and then I think we will have a motion for judgment on the pleadings, that on the face of the complaint, these are First Amendment violations. So I would hope that we would have a ruling in 4 to 6 months from now. But if not, if the court says, no, you're going to have discovery, and we have to depose everybody, it'll be a year. 12 to 18 months. But I think, and in the meantime, the law stays in place unless we try to move and join it. And that's another thing we haven't really talked through yet. We're sort of waiting to see these initial stages. Yes?
Can you tell us anything about the plaintiffs?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. That's actually an important part to include because it has a wonderful, wonderful twist to it. So the plaintiffs are a couple who had been Diane Ansley and Beck, help me with the second name.
Dr. Call me out.
McCoffey. I can't remember. I'm sorry. But to a couple from McDowell County that because they are faced with this issue, even though they're married, they're faced with this issue of having to sort of go. The 4 magistrates in their counties will basically say that they think that the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to lesbian, gay, bisexual people. Then we have a couple that are not yet married who live in Graham County, where Mr. Holland is. And then the third couple, wonderful, wonderful story. Roger and Carol Person. They met in the late 1960s at the North Carolina School for the Blind. They are both legally blind. And they graduated from the School for the Blind and went to the Industries for the Blind in Winston-Salem, which, if you don't know, I mean, that thing makes some serious money, doing government contracts and stuff. But they were supervisors. She is white and he is black. And they had 3 children together. And she had a son from a prior marriage. And in 1976, they decided, and this is 9 years after the Supreme Court said that bans on interracial marriage were unconstitutional. They went to a magistrate's office in Forsyth County, and 2 magistrates told them that they would not marry them because God disapproved of interracial marriage. One of them read from Leviticus, the verse that the clean shall not lie with the unclean. Unclean animals and clean animals shall not lie together. They went to a second magistrate, and he prayed the Our Father with them and told them that he could not marry them because it would be sin. And they sued in federal court. And it took a year, but the judge ordered the magistrate's office, not those 2. One of them actually had died by the time the order came out. But ordered that marriage take place. And actually, I think a district court judge stepped in and married who was a black woman, the first black woman judge in Forsyth County. So they are in the case, in large part because of that historical legacy, that was a religious belief about marriage. And Berger et al. Deny it when they've been challenged, but people have said, well, wouldn't that allow a magistrate to say, I'm not going to marry interracial couples, or I'm not going to marry Muslim couples, or I'm not going to, you could go down the list. Oh, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's only about sincerely held religious beliefs. Okay? So, those are the plaintiffs. And this is great. You know, Roger and Carol had been, there had been a couple stories written about them in May of 2015 because of sort of the context when the bill was being passed and McCrory vetoed it. They wrote a story about them. That's how we learned about them. And so, you know, the wonders of the internet, we found their address. I drove down to Moore County, down, you know, this road, this road, found it, knocked on the door, and said, hi, here's what we're doing. And after about an hour or two talking to them, they were like, that's great. One of our sons is gay. So it's really just a poignant part of this case, this couple. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
District court judges to perform marriages, maybe by the Senate to try to work around some of these problems and say, well, we got these other people here.
Well, actually, what under the law, that if all the magistrates in a county recuse themselves, the chief district judge names a judge, a district judge, to do weddings until the AOC finds someone to transport in. That would be a tougher thing to challenge because it wouldn't involve any taxpayer money because they're already paid. Sort of the nice thing about this in terms of ability to challenge it is because this thing. Although you still have this crazy thing about the retirement contributions. Yeah.
So I'm curious, do you think that the federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act ever have to be challenged or ever have to be challenged in order to, is that going to pose issues down the line?
Well, the North Carolina has not adopted its own act, so and the federal act clearly doesn't apply to state action. So, but it's a question is, will someone finally at some point do a challenge to federal RFRA? If you read the Bourne case, it's almost like begging for that challenge, saying this is way beyond the authority of the court, the authority of Congress to try to deal with an issue. And I would think you could use that analysis from Bourne to try to challenge some of these RFRA laws in Alabama and South Carolina and other places. I don't know how successful that would be, but it's certainly what they call a colorable argument. I mean, you could go in and say, you're not addressing a serious problem. You're just trying to, as Warren said, you're trying to restate what the constitutional right is, which is not your role as Congress. Was that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, well, I just wonder, like, if eventually the goal is to, like, protect LGBT people federally, is the federal RFRA, already preventing that in some way?
Well, that's an interesting question, whether there's an argument that it protects the rights of LGBT that day. Because there are religious groups that believe that you know, I mean, that was part of, for those of you who don't know, when we filed our marriage challenge here, we added a First Amendment claim because the way the North Carolina statutes were written, it actually was a misdemeanor to do a commitment ceremony because you didn't turn in the license within 10 days of this marriage. And it was a misdemeanor to do a marriage without a license and then not to turn the license in. So we said that this was like criminalizing the religious belief. And no one had ever been arrested, but on the face of the statute, that was a violation. So it's sort of there's this arguments at different times where you can use religion as to your advantage. But I think another thing to understand about RFRA, because you know there's been the one you always hear about is the couple in Oregon that's been fined $130,000 because they wouldn't do the marriage cake. Well, that was under an Oregon non-discrimination statute that specifically said you can't discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation. It's a state claim, it has nothing to do with RFRA. RFRA not only doesn't apply to the states, but it doesn't apply to those kinds of cases. There was actually a case in New Mexico, similar case for someone, a photographer, declining to do a wedding after agreeing to do so and found out it was a lesbian couple, refused to do the photography, and they sued, and they raised RFRA as their defense. RFRA has nothing to do with private transactions. So be encouraged there. I mean, RFRA really has this narrow scope. It's really about federal regulations that impact religious beliefs. Yes?
So in McDowell County, they're saying magistrates won't perform marriages, but what about the register of deeds, whose job it is, you pay them $60 and they give you the license and you bring it somewhere to have the ceremony? What's the status of the register of deeds?
We did not include that in this case. there's potentially another case that the Register of Deeds in Greensboro in Guilford County is dying for someone to help file a lawsuit because so many of his, I think it's a man, right? But so many of his magistrates have recused that he's having to hire temporary employees and part-time people to keep up with his caseload. He's having to add office space, spending all this public money to cope, which I think is a great basis for a challenge. But the assistant registers of deeds and the deputies are not officers. They're employees of the register, so they don't take an oath of office. So it's harder to challenge that aspect of it. And again, it's the same, it was written in kind of this, if you will, dastardly way that to make sure that people could get the licenses, but just some people could be excluded or recuse themselves from issuing them. And I think, again, it's a harder challenge because there's no oath involved. But the challenge would be in a place like that, like Guilford, where you're having to spend money to adapt to the law. But that's a little hard too, because it's not, the spending's not ordered by the legislature. That's the Register of Deeds trying to cope, which may not have standing on that. Yes?
Does that mean that the register of deeds would be permitted now to hire someone who would perform those appearances?
I-
That they interview and ask prospective employees whether they'd be willing to do
And then decline to hire them if they,
Yes.
that's an interesting question. I expect that would be within the authority of the Register of Deeds to not do that. And the one reason is, there are these cases where you can't discriminate against someone because of their religious beliefs, but they're largely, the exclusion to that largely applies to churches. You know, someone's in a ministerial function, then the church can look at their religious belief as a requirement of office. But here, it would be sort of this mix. There's no, the issue would be, is it religious discrimination or is it an administrative decision? I need to have you to be willing to do this duty, and if you're not, for your religious reasons, I'm sorry, but I can't hire you. It'd be interesting, I haven't heard of a challenge. I mean, it's one that someone could probably make, but I think the balance would be in favor of the Register of Deeds in that case.
Do you know if the register in Guilford is actually asking for part-timers?
I don't. Oh, I'm sure, because, I don't know, but those people are coming in to help sort of carry that caseload, so I'm assuming he's asking whether they're okay with doing same-sex marriages. But I don't know that. That made me think of, wow, no, go ahead, next question, so in the back there, yeah.
So I want to throw a twist to the topic that you talked about. And I'm hoping that the state of North Carolina is paying attention. Here we just recently in Charlotte were able to change a particular law to allow transgender, the LGBT community to
Right.
use city bathroom
Right.
if we so choose. My question to you is, because I know that, well, two questions on it. I'm wondering if many of the other counties around the state are paying attention to what Governor Corey is about to attempt to do, and if there is any precedence of legal action similar to this one that is taking place in other states that actually have passed the same law, but their governor stepped in, the state stepped in to try to overturn it.
For those who don't, there actually is, there is a very interesting and important case that really kind of opened the door on marriage equality, which before Amendment 1 in North Carolina, there was Amendment 2 in Colorado, which back in the 90s they passed a law saying that no town, no government, no business could pass any rule to protect the rights of gay and lesbians. And that got challenged as an animus-driven law that denied sort of rational basis and didn't satisfy any sort of interest that the government could articulate, and was targeted at a group of people. So we've had this discussion about the Charlotte Ordinance, is that if they try to strike it down as to whether or not that is what they call a Romer violation, they're going to have this argument that it's about the public, this stuff they've been saying, the public safety Of course, they're gonna have statistics showing that there's no such issue of people being attacked because transgender people are using the bathroom of their choice. It's just, it's a, you know, whatever you think, I mean, it's just, objectively, there's no evidence supporting that fear, which is really unfortunate, because the fear has really driven the debate in Charlotte. But I do think it would, Romer is sort of the framework under which that challenge, and you know, and you would have an interesting question as to whether or not calling a special session and spending money on a special session to attack that law would be a First Amendment violation. I hadn't thought of it to stay here now, but I think that that's kind of an interesting
I was just gonna
question.
ask that
Yeah.
before, and we were talking about this review, similar situation. If they do call a special session, they focus so much on the dollar amount, but that's using public dollars for, in what I would say, an interest to discriminate, which.
Well, and then you get into this, it's to discriminate, but the issue would be, under this standing issue would be, is it a First Amendment violation? Is it for a religious purpose primarily? And they're gonna argue it's a public safety purpose, and you know, you sort of have this
They've been pushing public safety,
Oh,
they've been
they have to.
God into that equation
Right.
in a lot of their press releases,
Right.
and at noon today would be interesting, because they're doing, so the opposition side is gonna do their piece in front of the building.
Right.
So, interesting.
But, go ahead, Aaron.
How do you argue it's a public safety issue with no data?
Right, that was, I would just say, I mean, that is the, and I expect, I mean, I expect you could go to the FBI database or the kind of people that collect crime information and find that there's, I would be surprised if there is any report of any person who's truly transgender attacking somebody because they're in the restroom of their choice. I mean, it's just,
We've pulled.
I would think it's probably more dangerous. And everyone makes this, I've made this, I'm not the first one to say this, but it's probably more dangerous for the transgender person to be forced to go into the opposite gender bathroom and be attacked by people who have aversion to transgender.
We pulled all the crime statistics, and there are, so, and that's why so Mayor Roberts has pushed that emphasis on zero, because she's informed. That's not what they want to hear.
Right.
Wrong.
But I will say this, you got, I mean, with 650 people coming to this conference up from prior years, and with, if you just think, I remember coming to this the first time I came, I think was in 13. Yeah, or maybe 14, but a couple of us have talked about this. You know, if in May of 2012 when Amendment 1 passed, and I had said to you, that'll be unconstitutional within 18 months, you would have had me committed. You know, the legal landscape here just transformed so quickly in the courts and in public opinion. I mean, it's been a remarkable change in social attitude. But here, oh, I forgot, who wins the quiz? Who wrote Smith? Unbelievable. Nino Scalia, recently deceased, wrote that language. We court anarchy if we allow religious beliefs to excuse people from their civic obligations. It's incredible. Yes?
How do these proceedings and that kind of thing get applied in cases of polygamy?
The question was, how did all these issues apply in cases involving polygamy challenge? And obviously Utah is the one place where that is an issue because of the Mormon culture there. And they're actually, I'm not really familiar with it, but I do believe that a district court upheld the polygamous marriage in Utah in the last 18 months or so. But that was kind of the argument, you know, from the bench in the Obergefell arguments, you know, isn't this going to result in polygamy? And, you know, the question, a couple of questions about that was, well, there's really not a tradition of polygamy outside the Mormon culture in the U.S. There are traditions of polygamy in many cultures in the world. But so, it's sort of like, it's not really a huge issue. But I don't know, I would think that Obergefell would support people who had a truly religious belief and supported a culture that polygamy was valid. Whether they can order a state to recognize a marriage in a state like North Carolina where polygamy is not sort of a custom, that's a different question, I guess. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much.
So let's get started so that we finish in time so you can get your lunch. Those of you who didn't order a box lunch, you're going to have to go make your way into Asheville, find your lunch, which is a fun thing to do. So welcome to the Medicaid Expansion Advocacy Strategy panel. My name is Carolyn McAllister, and I direct the HIV/AIDS Policy Clinic at Duke Law School and also the Southern HIV/AIDS Strategy Initiative, or SASI. And I am joined today by Amanda Stem, who is with the Western North Carolina AIDS Project. She's a case manager and their new advocacy director. And also Carolyn Reeves, who is doing a story project called Truth Comes Out. So we're all going to be talking to you. It is our intent to leave at least 15 minutes at the end of our presentations so that we can have some discussion of your experiences around Medicaid expansion efforts. So what I'm going to do is start with an overview of the issue and kind of where we are with Medicaid expansion. And then Carolyn is going to tell you a story of someone who is impacted by the lack of current Medicaid expansion in most of our southern states. Amanda will talk about advocacy efforts in the Asheville area, and then I'll come back and kind of give an overview of what's going on in the Deep South states, to the extent anything is around this issue. So that's our plan. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page on the issue of Medicaid expansion, I'm going to take a step back and talk about the Affordable Care Act for just a minute. So the Affordable Care Act, the whole concept around the Affordable Care Act was that in order to cover everyone, whether or not people had pre-existing conditions, we needed to have everybody in the risk pool of people who were going to be insured, because otherwise it's not going to be affordable to do this. So we got to have the healthy people in here, and we got to have the people with chronic health conditions who are covered. So the different components of the Affordable Care Act as it was passed by Congress were that, first of all, anyone who had existing adequate insurance didn't have to change. If you were working for someone and you were covered, you could keep that insurance. If you had traditional Medicaid, you could keep your Medicaid. If you were on Medicare, you could keep your Medicare. But another piece of this was that that the Affordable Care Act wanted to end discrimination, so that health conditions could not prevent you from being able to afford insurance. So pre-existing conditions went away. There are no caps on annual or lifetime coverage, and no unfair terminations. There's a coverage mandate for most people. There are exceptions, and I'm not going to go into the weeds on the Affordable Care Act because that would take our whole session. But most individuals and large employers have to provide coverage. Well, that's interesting. We're just going to quit that. Okay. And then there are new coverage options, which included the insurance marketplace, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then Medicaid expansion. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? Great. So this is the original concept of the Affordable Care Act. The red, which is not red for you, The pre-2010 options is so much prettier right here. The color is messed up. The pre-2010 options, as I said, were if you had insurance coming into this, you could keep your insurance as long as it was adequate. But then the Affordable Care Act added the insurance marketplace. That's the healthcare.gov website where you go if you don't have insurance and you want to apply for insurance. You can go there. And it included subsidies for people making 100% to 400% of the federal poverty level. So that's $11,770 up to $47,080. You were entitled to some financial subsidies to help make the insurance affordable. I'm not going to go into all the issues that people are having with affording their insurance. That's not today's topic, but I will acknowledge that. And then the third kind of leg on the stool was Medicaid expansion. And as the law was written, anyone who made less than 138% of federal poverty level would be entitled to insurance just based on their income, free. So then the Supreme Court came down with their decision, National Federation of Independent Business versus Sebelius, on June 8th, 2012, and effectively made Medicaid expansion, that third leg of the stool, optional for the states. So the states can decide whether or not to expand their Medicaid programs. And I think for most of you, this is old news. You know this. That's why you're here, because you're interested in this issue. So today, this is the reality for most states, for those states that have not expanded Medicaid. You still have the pre-Affordable Care Act options. You have the marketplace where if you make between 100 and 400% of poverty, you're entitled to subsidies, but there's no help for people making less than 100% of the federal poverty level. So that's approximately $12,000 and under. There's no help for those folks. This is just the map, which you've probably seen, of the states that have expanded Medicaid. So 31 states have actually expanded. And Louisiana, our first really deep South state, is coming online July 1st. That's the result of electing a Democratic governor in Louisiana. So they're in the lighter purple and blue there, but we're going to get Louisiana. So we'll have 32 states. All those in that putrid looking green up there are the states that have not expanded Medicaid. And as you can see, the South is a solid block. So the coverage gap, let me talk about that. For those people in states that have not expanded Medicaid, there are thousands of people falling into what's called the coverage gap. So what that means is they earn too much to qualify for Medicaid. So they're earning more than 100% of poverty. They're earning more than 11,000 whatever. But they're earning too little for subsidies in the marketplace, under the marketplace. So that didn't come out exactly right. I'm going to just say this in plain English. If you are making $11,770 or more, up to 400% of poverty, you're going to get subsidies. Okay, so that's the blue, the marketplace subsidy. If you are making less than 100% of poverty, and all the way down to zero for most adults, then you're not entitled to subsidies because the law was written to include those folks in Medicaid. But for the states that aren't expanding Medicaid, those folks are entitled to no financial help at all. Now, if you're entitled to traditional Medicaid, which means you have to be disabled, or you have to be, in most states, a parent with children and making on average less than 44% of federal poverty level, you might be in that far left. Those folks might get a little bit of Medicaid. But for childless adults, if they're making less than 100% of poverty, there is no financial help. So they are basically uninsured unless they are qualified for some to go to a free clinic or something like that. So that's the coverage gap, those folks under 100% of poverty in states that aren't expanding Medicaid. In states that have expanded Medicaid, those folks are on Medicaid, full insurance. Just very quickly to show you who is included in that coverage gap. On the right-hand side, 89% of people in the coverage gap are in the South. as CDC defines the South. And 4 of our states have the bulk of those folks. Texas has 26% of those people. Florida has 20%, Georgia 11%, right here in North Carolina, we have 8% of the people in the coverage gap. More than half of the adults in the coverage gap are adults of color. So if you look on the left, Hispanic and Black is almost half. And then you can see age and health distribution. So I don't want to go over the few minutes that I want to take for this introduction, so I'm going to let's step back. I'm going to shut this down for right now. And I want Carolyn to come up and she's going to tell you a story of someone right here in this area who's in that coverage gap.
Just a quick announcement, the CLE sheet to sign in for attorneys is out front now, so make sure you do that after the workshop if you're an attorney looking for CLE credit.
Thank you.
Hi everybody. You can hear me in the back? Thank you. My name's Carolyn Reeves. I'm working on my master's degree in arts and medicine out of the University of Florida. And I'm working right now on a health advocacy project. I'm addressing health disparity in the LGBT community through a storytelling project. So I'm creating an educational tool, a video of personal narrative of LGBT community members talking about occurrences of health disparity in their life. One of the people I was connected with is Amanda's client, Jamie, and he is one of my storytellers. He fits into this workshop really well, so I'm here to tell you his story to shed a personal light on this issue of Medicaid expansion. Jamie was in rehab for substance abuse when he received his HIV diagnosis. He was shocked and blindsided. There he was, working harder than he ever had to improve his life, making incredible progress in his recovery, and then one day, everything changed. While still reeling from the news, while still in a state of numb shock, his doctor force-fed him a barrage of terrifying information. Numbers, projections, levels, precautions, what to expect, what to avoid, technical jargon that he could barely understand. In the overwhelm, his mind only became more traumatized. Jamie acquired HIV from a partner who had been unfaithful. In so many ways, he felt cheated. After the shock morphed into a burning sense of injustice, he railed against the new reality he was living in. He really needed things to be in his favor in order to root the tenuousness of his newfound substance abuse recovery into solid and sustainable ground. But it seemed as though the ground was crumbling under his feet. Then he had some good luck. He was able to get an extension to stay in rehab longer. He was connected with the Western North Carolina AIDS Project and his caseworker, Amanda. He describes Amanda's help as the lifeline that guided him out of the impossibly confusing and overwhelming position he was in. He can't say enough good things about WNCAP. He has no idea what he would have done without them. Then, for the first of many times, Jamie applied for Medicaid. Jamie, as a single male with no dependents, no disability, and no income, was denied coverage. He left rehab feeling insecure that his health care needs would be met, and he went to live with his mother, determined to find work. He has found work sporadically, but he suffers from debilitating back pain, which has forced him out of a job more than once. Note, while his back pain is debilitating, it isn't disabling, at least not in the eyes of the government. Thanks to the Ryan White Care Act and ADAP, Jamie receives HIV-related care and medication through the Western North Carolina Community Health Services. As with WNCAP, Jamie says he doesn't know what he'd do without winches. He's so grateful that he can get his meds every month. But it doesn't come without a struggle. He doesn't have a driver's license, and he lives over 40 minutes away from the clinic in a rural area with no public transportation. Being able to get to his appointments is a regular challenge. That wouldn't be the case if he had Medicaid and could receive care locally. Trying to keep up with the paperwork and feeling like he might lose his connection to the assistance he receives is a regular and constant threat. And he's only receiving HIV-related care. That doesn't include his back problems. At the same time that he was diagnosed with HIV, Jamie found out that he has hepatitis C. Under his current healthcare provisions, he isn't eligible for any treatment for the hep C. If he had Medicaid, he would be receiving treatment. If Jamie had Medicaid, he could also address his back problem. He would get the treatment and therapy he needs to correct the issue. If he had health coverage now, he could be an able-bodied working citizen for another 30 years. Jamie's only 34, but he doesn't have Medicaid, and his untreated back problem is only getting worse. It's leading to other compounding health problems like obesity, because his constant physical pain makes it difficult to move. If he doesn't get health coverage, the condition will worsen, and eventually he will qualify for disability. But that doesn't have to happen, and that's not what he wants, and I doubt that's what the government wants either. Jamie wants to be a working and productive member of society. Unfortunately, he's not getting the care he needs to be able to do that. Imagine how he feels. He tells me that he hits a roadblock around every corner. He tells me he's trying to stay sober, and that's requiring a great deal of his strength. He tells me that it's an exhausting struggle to make sure he can get to his doctor's appointments and keep up with the paperwork that gets him his care. He doesn't know if he can hold a job because of his untreated back condition. There is no feeling of security. And is he ever frustrated? The first time I spoke to him, he angrily sputtered about how it was politics getting in the way of his access to care, and that he's a person, and how could politics be more important than people? Sometimes he despairs. It feels like too much of a battle, he says. It's not worth it, he says. Sometimes, he confided in me, he thinks about ending his life. And that is the result of this system failing him. Failing to provide him with the security of healthcare that he needs and deserves. But Jamie isn't going to take that way out. He's a fiery and passionate soul. He talks about the dark thoughts of wanting to die, the times when he wonders what the point could possibly be of fighting so hard just to hit another roadblock. But then, he says he thinks of the people who had HIV and AIDS in the 80s, and he says that if he took that way out, it would be a slap in the face to them and to their struggle. And then he gets determined. His enthusiasm is infectious. He has vision and he has ideas about HIV testing parties, safe sex awareness initiatives, and condoms raining from the sky. He cares so much. He wants to help people. Even though he seems to walk a relentlessly uphill path, his spirit is indomitable and resilient. He makes me laugh every time I talk to him. Even though our conversations have focused largely on his hardship, they always leave me feeling inspired about life. He's just that kind of person. He's an exceptional person. I wish you could meet him. But there's kind of a great reason why he's not here today. He got a new job last week. It's at a restaurant, and the work involves physical activity and heavy lifting. That's not great for his back. But he's determined, and I so hope it works out for him. As far as healthcare coverage goes, however, things are looking basically the same. Even with his new job, he won't make more than $12,000 a year, so he won't qualify for the marketplace subsidies. And in this state, where Medicaid isn't expanded, Jamie, as a childless, employed adult, will continue to tread perilously on a mile-high tightrope with no safety net below. Thank you. I just want to say I am so proud of Jamie. His bravery is inspirational, and I think Carolyn did a really great job of capturing Jamie as a person, because I've been working with him for a long time. So, my name is Amanda Stem, and I am the Advocacy Supervisor with the Western North Carolina AIDS Project, WNCAP. And what WNCAP does is we provide case management services to people living with HIV and AIDS. We provide prevention education to the community, and as well as free testing, condom distribution, HIV 101 at treatment centers, the jails. We also do advocacy policy work with programs, policies around HIV and that impact our clients. We serve 18 counties in North Carolina, including Buncombe County, which is our biggest county, all the way to, I think it's like Cherokee County that rubs up against the Tennessee line, and Shelby County, or Cleveland County, where Shelby's located, that rubs up against South Carolina. So it's a pretty big population. It's all very rural too. And why Medicaid expansion is important to WNCAP is, as you heard about Jamie, and he's kind of a classic client, uninsured, HIV positive, not working, but now he is. So that's a classic kind of demographic. And we know HIV is a chronic illness, and that people with a chronic illness require chronic treatment. This is lifelong treatment. This is going to the doctor at least twice a year, but usually 3 times to 4 times a year. Labs, medications, then there's side effects from your medications. And so having Medicaid and having insurance for our clients is super important to keep that ongoing. And so people don't fall out of care, because falling out of care is a public health risk to the community, but also it's a risk to a person. And we provide case management to about 450 people in the 18-county area. And something that we see with our clients is that they have one option: to go to a doctor, to see a provider. They aren't empowered to get to choose who they get to go see, because there's only one provider in the 18-county region that'll treat HIV patients without insurance. And some of those people are coming from Cherokee County, which rubs up against the Tennessee border. How do we make it there is, beyond me, WNCAP. But so getting them there is really important, and they can fall out of care. So if they had Medicaid, then they could see someone in Cherokee County. They wouldn't have to bust through all of these barriers, work every day, feel insecure about their care, fall out of care. They could just see someone locally. But instead, they have one choice, and it's here in Buncombe County. And also, Medicaid would provide preventative services. So people who are uninsured living with HIV, they can use Brown and White funds for care, but can they get specialty care? Can Jamie go to a physical therapist for his back problems? No, they get, primary care, and that's about it, and medications, and that's about it, but no access to preventative care. So what are we doing here on the ground to promote Medicaid expansion? So North Carolina did not expand Medicaid, as we know, and it's huge. So I have about 40 members, including myself, in a Medicaid expansion coalition. And we come from all kinds of, it's just people who are generally interested in Medicaid expansion. It's people from the United Way, Planned Parenthood. And it's also smaller organizations. We have someone from an insurance company
who sells private insurance but realizes the importance and the impact of Medicaid expansion. We have moms who are just interested, volunteers. So it's a wide range of people coming together. And we meet monthly, and we talk. Right now, we're kind of gathering what's going on, what can we do, what are our next steps. But one thing that we do is storytelling. And as you can see, the impact of Jamie's story, you were all, I'm sure, moved. And storytelling is huge when it comes to advocacy. Here, the emotional, people are tugging on the heartstrings. You feel something, and that is kind of what advocacy is about, feeling something, getting this motion that starts it, this emotional story. Where does it go from there? So gathering stories about people who are impacted through Medicaid expansion, telling their story. So there's Jamie's story, and then there's so many others, and they're all very emotional, and it's a big source of advocacy work is storytelling. And also, a big thing we do is voter engagement. So if we can't, this Medicaid expansion group we're not going to be able to expand Medicaid on our own, but who can? The voters, community members. That's where we can start, registering people to vote. So at WNCAP, we do voter registration, and we are trying to register people living with HIV and also active drug users. So we have a big IV drug use population, and so empowering them. Hey, are you registered to vote? Do you know that even though you have a felony, you can vote? So educating people on the topic in itself. Why is this important? Well, if you're an active drug user and you don't have insurance, but you fall into the gap, even though you want treatment, you might not be able to get treatment. With Medicaid, that gives you at least the option whenever you are ready. So we're educating people as they come in our door. Hey, this is why voting is important to you as a person, and then to the community. Also, some of the things that we do in the coalition are community education. So first, here speaking to you about Medicaid expansion, and then going to other events, campus-wide events, letting our college students know. Health care events, health clinics, health fairs, going out into the community and doing that. Right now we're focused on Buncombe County, and I feel like, we should start expanding the coalitions, who we reach, because I think we should be reaching farther out counties, educating people. I don't think a lot of people actually know Medicaid expansion is a thing. And so keep continuing educating people. This is what Medicaid expansion is. I mean, you're all here today because you knew about Medicaid expansion. But what about the people who live in Graham County, Cherokee County, Jackson County? And these are all farther west from Buncombe if you're not from North Carolina. These are really rural towns where they don't even know Medicaid expansion, was an option. So those are some of the things that we're doing in the coalition. At the end, when we do questions, I would really like to hear if any of you are doing anything in your communities about Medicaid expansion coalition efforts, because I would really love to learn, and that's why we're here.
All right, now I'm doing technology, just give me a moment. Did that one, so we don't want that. I'm just trying to make it big on here, but that's okay. I can figure this out. All right. This is our map. We've already looked at it once, just remind us of the work that we have to do, especially in our region. I want to spend just a minute talking about a little bit of an arcane subject, but I think it's important if for anyone who's doing advocacy around Medicaid expansion to understand the concept of Medicaid waivers. Sorry, but in our region, if you listen to any politicians talk about, who are in power, talk about Medicaid expansion, they are dead set against anything that they will call Obamacare. The only time that you hear support for Medicaid expansion is from the leaders in our region who can call it the North Carolina plan or the Alabama plan, and politicians go to great lengths to say this is not Obamacare. So there is a program that the federal government runs through, and it's authorized by the Social Security Act. It's the Section 1115 waiver program. And that allows the federal government to grant waivers to the states from certain Medicaid requirements to allow states to do basically time-limited demonstration programs in their Medicaid program and to experiment with new approaches to Medicaid. The waiver, the projects have to advance the objectives of Medicaid, and they can't cost any more. So if you look at the map, at this map, you see that those states that are shaded in, there are 6 states that have expanded their Medicaid program, but they have gotten one of these Section 1115, that's these Section 1115 waivers. And one southern state, Arkansas, is operating a plan